So today we are going to talk about job descriptions. So how to build them in TouchStone and more importantly, how to use them. And then towards the end, I'm going to end with a few management processes from the process library that I think are some of the best. So I'm going to go over here to the organization chart. Last week, we talked about technically how to build the organization chart and what its purpose is. Job descriptions are accessed through the organization chart. So each of these boxes represents a role or a position, an employee position in your business. It's not a person necessarily. You can define it as a role in the company or a position that is filled by an employee. When you select a box from the chart, I'm just going to choose bookkeeper here, it will then take you to the job description for this position. So job descriptions in TouchStone are a little different than maybe what some of you are used to when you think of a job description. The job descriptions in TouchStone are processes or work that each position or role is accountable for. So the job descriptions in TouchStone don't have like the qualifications of the position or recruiting and hiring information or salary information. They're not statements that explain the qualities of a position. They're purely a list, very succinct, clear list of what each position or role is accountable for. So having said that, if you have traditional job descriptions, and usually when I see a traditional job description, it's not really a list of the accountabilities of the position, although it might include that. It's usually stuff I would deem as hiring information. Generally, the traditional job descriptions will have subjective things on them, or they'll explain kind of in a broad idea what the position is responsible for doing, but they're definitely not typically clear, concise statements of what the specific work is and how to do that work. So if you have these traditional job descriptions, you can create a file, a process for them, and then upload those documents, then link them to the job descriptions, like right here, maybe in the strategic section. And they could be used for hiring purposes or for reference for the position. I'm going to go back here to the organization chart. So to start a job description, you can choose a box on your organization chart. So I'm going to add a box right here just so we can use it for example purposes. I'm going to go and edit the title here. I'm going to call this example position. I can spell it right, and then hit save. So now I've got this new position right here. So now I'm going to select it. And when I select it, this is what a blank job description looks like. So if you haven't built your job descriptions yet, this is what you're going to see. First thing right here, you see these little edit pencils. So I could edit the name of this position from the org chart, the face of the chart, or I can click this little edit button and then this opens for me to edit or change the position title. Underneath the position title, there's this field called the objective. And same thing, if I hit this little edit pencil, it's going to open up the objective field. The objective is the purpose of the position. It is the reason that it exists. It's usually a sentence or a phrase, so it's short. It's not a list of what the position does or what they're accountable for. It's a clear, concise statement, typically a sentence or a phrase, which describes the big picture result of this position. So I'm going to go back here to the org chart just to show you a few examples. This is the manager of marketing and sales. So this objective is create marketing strategies and objectives and manage the sales department. So clear, concise, kind of big picture. Let's go back here and look at another one. Maybe I have one for this. bringing superior knowledge of generally accepted accounting principles and profound know-how of reporting accountabilities to manage the company's bookkeeping activities efficiently. So that one's a little more of a mouthful. It's got, some really descriptive language. So these really just, they should be the way that you want them to be. You can have it more formal like this one is, or you can have it super simple like the marketing one was. Another thing that I've seen, I'm just going to go back to the org chart here, and I'm going to go to this position. Another thing I've seen is objectives like this. So if you just can't let go of this education and requirements of the position or these overall kind of skills, again, these are things that I might typically see on a regular job description and things that generally would be used for hiring. If you really like this type of information and you want it to be in front of your employees all the time, then you can put it into the objective field like this is. So I'll just hit the pencil here. This is a pretty big field and it holds the spacing. So I can do skills with, the colon and then describe it there. To me, this just makes the job description longer, and this type of information, I don't think employees need to know all the time when they've been working for you for a year or two. Like, why does this have to be right in front? So this is, again, what I said before about how this could be made into a process and just linked to the job description rather than being right here and on the top. But again, it's up to you. So let's go back to the org chart. Then I'm going back to this example position. The job description has two sections to it. There's strategic right here and tactical. Strategic processes, as we define them, are higher level in nature. So they're about reporting, developing, analyzing, building something, anything a manager does to manage employees. So performance review, onboarding. So these higher level strategic and managerial processes. This type of work or these processes also tend to be over here in the guiding the business function, key function. Tactical is the technical work. So it's not about managing anyone else. It's the day-to-day staff work. On the job description, we have these two categories just so you can categorize what's more high level or strategic in nature and what's tactical. These two sections, it's not super important that you get this absolutely right, like you're 100% sure that something's strategic and versus tactical. Don't get hung up on that. It's not super important, because when employees use TouchStone, they're going to be coming here to their control panel. They'll be able to access their job description here through the org chart if you want them to, and view it from there. But this is where they're going to come to access their processes, to use them, to be trained on them, to refer to them, to complete them. And when you go here to the control panel, I've got the ability to make groups like management, planning, finance. It's not strategic and tactical only. It's these more succinct work groups, which makes it super easy for employees to find things, and it's all in categories. So just remember that your employees and the people using TouchStone are going to come here to access their processes. They're not going to necessarily go to the job description on the org chart all the time. So I'm going to go here again. So strategic and tactical. So let's talk about how to add processes to a job description. So there are two ways. You can add them by using this toolbar item that says add existing process. Existing means that it's already in TouchStone, that it's on the 4 key functions in one place or another. And then you can add a new process. This is one that's new. It doesn't exist in TouchStone already. So let's go over the existing first. So if I click add existing process, now I'm looking over at the 4 key functions, and I'm going to find the processes that I want to link to this position. So the first thing it's asking me here is if this is going to go in the strategic section of the job description or the tactical section. We'll keep it in strategic. And then I hit the sub-function drop down here. And now I'm looking over at my 4 key functions. Here's the doing the business, running, getting. If you scroll down, you see guiding. And then I'm looking at the sub-functions that are inside of each of these key functions. If I choose a sub-function like service, I'm going to then see all the processes that are in that sub-function. So this is literally showing me the 4 key functions right now and what I've got in it. So once I see these processes here, I'm going to choose the ones that this position is responsible for. So I do that just by ticking off the boxes here. We'll take them all just for fun. And then I hit save. And now TouchStone has linked these processes here to this position. So just so this comes full circle, if we go over here to the 4 key functions and we go to doing the business, which is where these processes came from that I just linked. If you look here at the, let's scroll down here, this is the service subfunction. These are all the processes that I just linked to that position. So this add existing process allows you to look over at the 4 key functions and choose what the position is responsible for. So every process in the 4 key functions should be linked to one position or another on the org chart in the end. So every box on the org chart will have positions linked to it, which then creates the job descriptions. So let's go back here. So I've linked all of these, but let's imagine there's more processes in another subfunction that this position is responsible for. So I would just go back, add existing process, strategic or tactical again, hit the subfunction drop down, and then I would go to another subfunction. Click this. Now I see all these processes. So I choose this one, maybe this one, maybe this one. You scroll up and down here, then you see the whole list. And then I just hit save again. So now TouchStone's linked to these 3 processes. Usually based on what department the position is in. So let's say we're building the job descriptions for the sales and marketing department. Generally, I would know that I would go to the getting the business function. So if I'm going to build this job description, add existing process, this is an advertising position. So I know that here, when I'm going to go to the subfunction that has the processes that this position is accountable for, it's probably going to be in the getting the business function here, key function. And then I might even have a corresponding subfunction. And then I see all the processes. So think, what department is this position in? And then go to the correct subfunction and choose those processes. If it's a managerial position, you probably start by going to guiding the business here and maybe go to employee management, because every manager who manages people will have management processes that need to be on their job description. Choose those and then hit save. There are processes like managerial processes and some other processes, for whatever reason, would be linked to more than one job description, because that process is the accountability of more than one person. So these 3 positions are managerial positions. So that all the management processes in guiding the business would be linked to this position and this one and this one and this one, the president. And maybe this one, the senior tech. So a process can definitely be linked to more than one job description if it's the accountability of more than one position. So let's go back here. The processes are all drag and drop. So I can pull this up and pull this down just to reorder them. I can even move from the strategic to the tactical section. So I just moved this one from strategic up here to tactical, and then I can move them the other way as well. These, someone's asking about the colors of the positions here, processes. The colors, first of all, blue means that there's something in the process. So if I click this process, something in it means there's tools in it. Like here's a customer resolution form that's been built. There's an uploaded file here. So when a process has begun, like someone started documenting it, it's blue. And then when I'm finished with it, so once I've decided this process is fully documented, it's good to go, we're going to train people in it and use it, I manually can turn the process title black by clicking this button here. So then if we go back here to this job description, you'll see that that process title is now black. So that's what the color coding means. You're also going to see red processes when they're just titles and they haven't been documented yet. You'll also notice that once processes from the 4 key functions are linked to positions, like this one is, you'll also notice if there's missing objectives of the process. So right here, this says estimate verification process, evaluate estimated costs and actual costs and report on results. That's the objective in gray here. This one, the CSR called tracking board, is missing an objective. So if you see that, I'd really recommend that you just click on it and go right here and define it. Put the purpose of the process right here, because you can see that from the job description. I'm going to go back here. It's helpful for someone to be able to like see what's in this process or what it's there for. So fill in those missing objectives when you find those. So the first way to build the job description, add existing process and link the processes from the 4 key functions. The next way is to add them directly to the job description. So that's this toolbar item right here, add new process. If I click this add new process, TouchStone's prompting me for the process name. So you put in the title, name of the process, and then strategic or tactical, same thing. The extra step here is that TouchStone's going to make me put this on the 4 functions in its correct place, because the 4 key functions is always going to be a master list of all the processes. Now, those processes could be linked to job descriptions or not, but the 4 key functions is always going to show you everything that's in TouchStone, all the processes. So you'll want to think to yourself, what's the subject of this process? What is it referring to? What category or function does it belong in? And then go to that key function, or go to that subfunction rather, key function, then subfunction, and then just hit save. So now that process has been added right here to the job description. And if I click on this, you'll see from this breadcrumb trail right here that it's in the running the business key function in the finance subfunction, because that's where I chose to put it. While we're on this screen, I want to show you one other quick help tip. Right here on this process, so we're inside this process called title, name of the process. If I go here to link to job description, the first thing I'm going to see is that this process is linked to this position. And obviously that makes sense because that's the position I was on when I added the process. What's cool about this view is from here, I can link and unlink processes from job descriptions. So if I don't want this on this position anymore, this one that it's on in orange, I just click and then you'll see it's gone. That now turned gray. And then I can say, oh, well, now I want it on this one. I clicked it. It's asking me if I want it in the strategic or tactical section. And then I hit link. And now you see it's on this one. So this tool is useful when you've built all your job descriptions. And then let's say you add a new process. So you add a new process directly to the job description or to the 4 key functions. And then you just want to go and quickly add it to the job descriptions that it needs to be on. Rather than going to that position on the org chart and going add existing process and going through all those steps, all you need to do is just click right on that process and then go link to job description and then make sure it's on the correct job description. This is also a good way to make sure that you've linked all your processes to job descriptions. So what I mean by that is once all the job descriptions are built, you might want to just tick through every process, new employee onboarding, go link to job description, and make sure it's on the correct job descriptions. If it's not, add it. If it's on a wrong one, remove it. If it's good, then leave it and then hit the browser back button and then go to the next process. Click it, link to job description. Is this on all the right job descriptions? If the answer is yes, close it, then go back. I know this seems kind of tedious, but it takes you maybe 5 seconds per process. And it's really worth doing because first of all, it has you look at every process in your account, which might not sound like a big deal, but it is when you start to pull library processes, you're not really sure what's in there and if it's correct. So there's the benefit of looking at every process just for the benefit of making sure that that's a valid process that you are going to document and use at some point. And then the second benefit of doing that is to make sure it's on the correct job descriptions. So you're familiar with every process and you're making sure it's on the right job descriptions. And that's all done by using that link to job description button on the process tools page. So let's go back here to this position. So I can add existing processes using this toolbar item, or I can add new ones directly to the job description using this toolbar item. To the right of add new process, there's the send print button. When I click this, there's a lot of options here. These 3 have to do with printing or exporting the job description. So using print, I can print this directly to my printer. Print to Word is going to export the job description to Word. And then print to PDF is going to print it to a PDF. The print to PDF is the most polished kind of look when you're printing something. You want to export to Word if you want it to be editable. But I do have to say that be careful of that, because if you export this job description to Word and you make changes to it, then those changes are happening in Word. They're not happening in TouchStone. So I think it's really good practice to not export things to Word with the intent of editing them, even if it's a work plan or a checklist or anything. And it's just because it's better to make the changes in TouchStone. So only export things when you need a printed copy for whatever reason. And then these last toolbar 2 items under print send are for printing the operating manual for the position or exporting it to Word. So when I hit this print operating manual, what's happening is it's going to open up my printer settings. And now I'm printing the job description. So this is that job description here. And then TouchStone's going to print every tool inside of every process on this job description in order. So this is the estimate contract verification process, number 1. So now it's going into printing, the work plan for this, and then it's going into the next process. So the value of exporting this to Word, I'm just going to hit cancel on this back, is that you can do page breaks and what other fancy stuff you want to do. So if I export this to Word, and I don't have Word on this computer, but it would launch Word if you have it. And then you can make page breaks and fancy it up and put your logo on it. So some people I guess depending on your business or your industry, it's really important to be able to print things. And so we have print features all throughout TouchStone for that reason, because some people really just want to be able to print things. But just as a side note around printing, when you export something from TouchStone, you've then made a copy of it. And now you're saving that on your computer and you're emailing it to someone, and then you do it again the next day. Now you've got 2 versions of that. And you're creating what we call SOP chaos, which is the primary reason to have TouchStone, to get out of that standard operating procedure chaos. So try to shift. It also saves on resources if you're not printing things. So try to shift your company's mindset to one of paperless. So what that would look like is if I want somebody to see this job description in TouchStone, I would go up to the URL here, click it, right click, copy, and then I might just send them that link in an email and say, hey, look at this job description. As long as they're logged into TouchStone and they have access to this job description, and when they click that link, they're going to go right to it. So what that does is it trains your people and yourself, for that matter, to try to work in a paperless environment. So that's the send print right here. Few more things. I showed you the drag and drop. If you want to remove a process from a job description, you'll see when I'm scrolling, I'm just not even clicking, and I'm seeing these little remove buttons right here. So if you want to remove a process from a job description, I just hit remove. It's going to say, are you sure? You notice this word remove, it's not saying delete, it's saying remove. So now that estimate process is gone from this job description. It's over on the 4 key functions list still, though. So the only way to delete a process permanently is to go to the 4 key functions and delete it from there. If you delete it from the 4 key functions, it's going to remove it from all the job descriptions it's on. But it doesn't work that way in reverse. If you remove it from here, it's still, for your own protection, is still on the 4 key functions, and you'd have to go there to remove it as well. So I think that's it for the functionality of job descriptions. I want to make one point before we talk about using job descriptions. So I'm going to go back to the org chart here, and I'm going to go to this position. So this is the job description for the manager of administration and finance. And all these processes here have been linked to this position, obviously. So all the processes that you're seeing here are now on this job description. If I go to the dashboard here and I look at this control panel I have assigned, I'm going to see all the processes that have been linked to the position for the manager of administration and finance. So when I click here, all of these processes are the exact same processes that are on the job description for this position. So that's how the control panels are populated. Once you've built the job description over here, and then you've gone to account administration over here, you go to user accounts, you've added your employees right here, and then you choose an employee, and you go here to control panel, and you assign them a role on the org chart. So I have this assignment. It's now when I log into TouchStone, I'm going to see my position right here, and I'm going to be able to access all those processes that have been put on my job description. I access them through the control panel right here. So there is a connection between the job descriptions and the processes you put on them and the control panel. They're exact mirrors of each other. So if I go here to the org chart and I choose this position, I'm going to add a new process to this just to make sure this point comes across. Let's go to this one and add a completely random process and hit save. Now I've just added this productivity reporting process to this job description. It's probably down there at the bottom. If I go back to the dashboard here and I click my control panel, I'm going to see this process right here. The default list just appeared because a new process has been added. Now I can take this process and I can move it. Let's move it down here to this group. And then when I refresh, that default list is going to go away. And here's that process. Now the opposite is true as well. If I go to the job description, I remove this process, well, it's going to take it out of the control panel. So I just want to make sure that that connection made sense to everyone. When you have non-admin users that you've set up in TouchStone, they're going to be assigned a box on the org chart. That's how they gain access to their processes. And when they go to TouchStone, they're not going to see the 4 key functions. They'll see the org chart, but everything will be grayed out except for the position that they've been assigned. And they can go to that position and look at the processes. But the main place they're really going to access them is through their control panel in the dashboard. All right. So let's talk about how important job descriptions are and how to use them. So every role or position in the company through TouchStone, once the job descriptions are built, has a complete, clear, concise list of what they're accountable for. So if I'm the bookkeeper here, the first thing the job description gives me is this clear list of what I'm supposed to be doing. When we do employee surveys, and there's information about this on the internet, one of the biggest complaints that employees have is they're not clear what they're supposed to be doing. They're not clear on what other positions are supposed to be doing. So oftentimes this is caused by the not clear uniformity of work and the lack of resources in a small business, where if somebody steps up and says, I can do that, then suddenly now that's their accountability. But is it really though? Because I just said I'd volunteer for that one day, but then am I supposed to do that all the time? So it's a combination of this chaos happens due to lack of clear accountabilities. So that is one of the wonderful things that a job description like this can do. Even if you haven't documented any of these processes, just the mere fact that you have a list of what the bookkeeper is supposed to do is a great milestone to get to. Once the documentation is done, like there's a step-by-step for how I do the budget. There's a step-by-step or a work plan for how I do cash flow planning, how I do accounts receivable. Now this is like really taking on a huge amount of value, because it's not just what I do, it's the complete how-tos of how I do it. It's the documentation of the most efficient way to collect receivables. From a management point of view, it becomes a way to hold employees accountable. Because if I have a completely documented process for how to do accounts receivable with deadlines and due dates, that one's empty, and clear step-by-steps with checklists that have to be filled out, with forms that are completed saying what I've collected and what I haven't collected. Now I can really hold that employee accountable to this process in a really tangible way. The opposite of that is to say to the employee, well, it's your job to do accounts payable. Let me show you how I do it. Practice doing it. Ask me if you have questions. And then the employee for months is coming, questions. And then I look at the AR list and I'm like, what happened? Like everything's 90 days late. I told her she needed to, I explained it to her. Well, now I'm going back to her and I'm saying, well, or him, and saying, well, you were supposed to give these people calls on the 30 days and the 20 days. I told you that when when I first trained you. And she's like, oh my God, I thought I was doing it, but I didn't, I forgot how to run the report and I didn't know how to track it. You guys have all had these conversations. As a manager, it's not fair for me to then get mad at her and say, well, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. I could, and a lot of managers do, but it's really not fair because I advocated that accountability to her. I didn't delegate it to her. I didn't say, this is what you need to do, and here's a step-by-step for how to do it. We've all thought this through. This works very well. Just follow it. That's delegating. So from a managerial point of view, it puts you in a much more, not powerful, but strong position with your employees, because you're very clear through training them on all the processes and the documentation. You're very clear that they should know how to do what they're doing. And when you approach it that way, then you're going to get more ownership and you're going to get quality work as opposed to doing it the other way. So these job descriptions also become reference for an employee. If they forget how to do something, if they lose track of what they're supposed to be doing, if they have things like budget creation that happens once a year and they haven't done it for a year, how do I do that now? I remember, how did I do it last year? So they can refer back to a work plan or a step-by-step for how it's done. And that has a huge value. Oftentimes I see employees just trying to make it up because they don't remember. trying to piece it back together in their minds because they literally forgot how they did it. So this being able to refer back to processes can be incredibly valuable as well. So I'm going to go here to the dashboard. So let's talk about, that was just a little bit about why I believe job descriptions, the job descriptions in TouchStone can be so valuable and are fantastic management tools. But let's talk about, like, practically speaking, what are some ways that you can use them? So the very first prominent, most important way is to use them for training purposes. So if I have a new employee, they need to be trained. Existing employees also need to be trained. Let's talk about new employees just to start with. So if I hire a new bookkeeper right here, and I've got the job description built in TouchStone, and I've got some, maybe not all, but just some processes documented, eventually all, but just some is good enough. It's better than nothing. I set up this employee. I set up Mary here. I'm sure if this is the right one. Yeah, let me just hit the back button here again. So I set up Mary here in account administration over here. She's new. I assign her to the bookkeeper role. I give her read-only access, say, to that role, and which gives her read-only access to all those processes. When she logs into TouchStone, she sees bookkeeper right here in the control panel section. So I'm going to get ready for Mary's training, for new employee training. So one way to do it, which works really well, is to create groups like you see here, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and then organize her processes that she needs to be trained on into training weeks. Now, depending on how complicated this position is, how many processes there are, it might take more than a month to train a bookkeeper. If it's a higher level position, these groups might be months and not weeks. If it's a position that could be trained really quickly, then these could be days even. So you need to think about this position and how long you think it should typically take a adequate or person with the minimum requirements, how long it should take them to learn all these processes. If you've never done, or your managers have never done training like this before, you have to think it through. The job descriptions really help you, though. I'm going to go back here to the org chart. So if I got the job descriptions built, if I have them built for like apprentice tech and then lead tech, if I go here and I'm thinking as the manager, so I got to teach him clocking hours, labor management, purchasing, customer satisfaction, and how to do his daily to-do list. So guesstimate to yourself, how long should it take for someone to learn how to clock their hours? Let's say 2 hours or 1 hour. Think through labor management, performing quality work. Maybe that's more of a comprehensive or a time-intensive process, and maybe this takes a week. So you look at each of the processes and just guesstimate to yourself. You got to start somewhere. It's not going to be perfect right off the bat, but managers who know how this work is done can probably make a pretty educated guess on it. So then in the control panel for the apprentice technician that I've just hired, I would put these processes into those work weeks. So let's go back here to the dashboard and then back here to Mary. So build a group right here, really easy. You just click and then you just put in the group name, like week, this would be week 5, and then save it. So now I've got, and I can drag this down. It puts the one you put in first at the top. And now I've got 5 weeks here, and then I can take processes and drag them down into those weeks. So here's where I'm thinking through how long should it take, and then I'm organizing it by these weeks. So now, once I've got this organized, first of all, this is a pretty incredible thing, and for this reason. If I know that it's going to take a new bookkeeper 5 weeks to learn how to be the bookkeeper, and I can take the amount of money I'm going to pay that person, a little bit of overhead time, and I add it all up for 5 weeks, boom, I suddenly know what it's going to cost me to hire a bookkeeper. And that's, for those of you who are growing a business, that's an incredible thing to know. I talked a little bit about this last week when we were talking about organization strategy. If I know it's going to cost me $10,000 and 2 months worth of time to train a apprentice tech, and then I know once they get up to lead tech, it's going to cost me another $10,000 and another 3 weeks or 4 weeks of time. Well, now I'm starting to really understand the scaling of my business and the cost of that. And then I can really start to play this juggling act between sales and marketing and operations really well. Because I know if I put in money into advertising and that converts at a certain rate, and then I've got to hire this person and this person so that in 2 months they're up and ready to go. And I know that's going to cost me $20,000. Now, suddenly those questions about can I afford to hire someone really become much clearer. So let's go back to Mary here. The second wonderful thing that just this laying out of processes and training weeks does is that I can tell whether I've hired a reliable, qualified person or not before it's too late. So the first thing to do, and you should do this, before you document the processes, is really think, what are the minimum qualifications for the bookkeeper? Do I want this bookkeeper to have a bachelor's degree in accounting and know QuickBooks and have 5 years of experience using it? Or do I have simple enough processes that someone who has, maybe no education, but 5 years of experience using QuickBooks is good enough and they can learn how to do it? Or do I want to hire an apprentice technician, going back to that example, who has no experience? So figure out what the minimum qualifications are. And then when you hire that person, start them in on week 1. If she learns cash flow planning and the key performance indicators within a week and is competent in those things, then it's looking pretty good for Mary. Then if I go on to week 2 and she learns accounts payable, did that really well. And then I started her on budget creation. And then it becomes really clear to me that she doesn't know how to use spreadsheets and that she can't follow the process. Then what I might say at the end of week 2 is, this just isn't a good fit. So it happens like that. It happens where you get to know the person a little bit more. What they said on their resume may not be exactly what's true for them. They don't follow the processes. They're starting to learn, but then you see other issues. By managing them through this training, those things become apparent before it's too late. And what I mean by too late is before you've invested the $10,000, before you've invested the 2 months of time, and you're just going to live with the issues Mary has because you're already in it. And you can't stomach the fact of having to let her go and starting over again. So you want to figure out that she's not a good fit before that. So Mary goes through this new employee training and she sits down on her dashboard here and walks through the cash flow process. She's studying the work plan. She's looking at the templates. She may fill in some information. The manager may review it. So we'll talk more about training using management review in the last session. But the idea is that Mary goes through and learns each of these processes inside of TouchStone. And then I, as her manager, when I'm happy that she's learned this and she's proved that she's competent in it, I can even go to the process and flip these little flags. And someone's asking a question about this, so this is the answer. I can flip these little flags called trained, and then I get these little green check marks. So she knows that she's been approved to run these 2 processes. And then we go into week 2. So that's new employee training. Another example is ongoing training. And I'm going to use one of the library processes to talk about ongoing training with employees. So I'm going to go here to this control panel. And there's a process that's in the Guiding the Business library. It's called one-on-one meetings right here. So in the one-on-one meeting process, this is a simple process that, shouldn't be there, but you get the idea. This is a simple 5-step process, which explains how to have a one-on-one meeting with your employees. So really easy. We don't even need to go over it. The idea is that you, at regular intervals, you sit down with that employee and you communicate with them. So it's different from shooting people emails and, the ways that we think we're communicating. This is over Zoom if you don't have an office, but it's where you sit down and really talk to the employee and communicate with them about how their work is going. So these one-on-one meetings can be once a week, they can be once a month, they can be once a quarter. I wouldn't do them less than once a quarter. That's really pushing it if you're only going to do it once a quarter. It doesn't take more time. And the reason it doesn't take more time, if that's what you're thinking, is because you're wasting so much time by not having these meetings. You don't even realize how much time you're wasting. What happens when you have this preset meeting, and there's even an agenda form for it in the TouchStone process. What happens when you have this preset meeting is you start to save things for the meeting. So you're not feeling like you have to micromanage every little thing that the employees are doing. You're going to start to save things for the meeting, which causes you and them to be more efficient. Obviously, if there's an emergency or something that's too important not to mention, obviously mention it. But a lot of things we just feel like getting off our chest, or we're just saying, they don't hear them half the time anyway. So in these agenda forms and preparing for the meeting, you can even start to put the things into the agenda that you want to talk about so you don't forget it. So you type in a reminder just to yourself here, I'm speaking as the manager, on what you want to discuss with this employee. So these little items, again, you're saving them for the meeting, which causes things to be more efficient. Another thing that happens with these meetings is it helps you be a better manager, because if you get upset about something or you're irritated by something, it's usually good to take a deep breath and really think about that before you just react. That's one of the qualities of a good manager. So knowing you're going to have this meeting, having this agenda form and keeping notes on it is going to help you to digest things a little bit more and come up with more of an effective way to talk to your employees about what's going wrong and right. How this relates to the job descriptions is it's great as a manager to be able to refer to processes when you're talking about things. So for example, phone calls. Let's say that Mary, I don't like her phone etiquette, or she upset someone on the phone. I'm making a note, phone calls. When I go to discuss this with her, I'm just going to save this so it's saved. I may go back to her processes and say, let's go back here. Here's Mary. If I want to talk to her about making phone calls, I would go back to her job description, her processes, and say, in the communications process, which is here on your job description, let's just imagine it is, there's a script on how you talk to people. So what I'm doing is referring back to training she should have had. I'm referring back to something tangible when I'm talking to her. And that's another reason why these job descriptions are such fantastic management tools, because it's a much different scenario if I say to Mary, I heard you on the phone the other day. You sounded terrible. You really upset this person. I trained you on this. You've heard other people do it. What is wrong? Like, what is going on with you? Like, why don't you? This is the management we all hate. And a lot of us have that dialogue going on in our minds. We don't say it like that, but it causes stress. It's like you're so pissed off at her. A better way, using your processes, is to say, gee, Mary, let's refer to the phone answering script. Let's just take a look at it. I heard you on the phone the other day, and it's really clear that you weren't following this process. What is wrong with the process? Let's figure it out. So what that kind of tone is doing is it's not saying, Mary, you're horrible, Mary, you're bad, Mary, I'm going to fire you. It's, what's wrong with the process? Let's talk about why it's hard for you to follow. Maybe you didn't understand it. Maybe let's go over it again. And that really diffuses all of that anxiety, and it allows Mary to be more open and perhaps really look at what she's doing and want to learn how to do it better. Another thing it does is it reinforces the processes. So it reinforces that script and lets her know that you're thinking about that. So I just did something here as I was talking. I went back to this one-on-one meeting form, but you'll notice that where I put number 1 phone calls on it, we didn't see that. It's because when I clicked here, I created a new agenda form. To get to the one that I started, I just go over here to saved, and then there it is right at the top, and I click it, and there's my notes. So with these one-on-one meetings, use them to reinforce processes, use them to talk about issues that are going on and address them. Use it to talk about goals and goals that the person has for themselves personally, goals you have for them overall. Talk about any issues that they're having. Ask them how they're doing. How's your day? How's your family? Just little things like that help you create this game worth playing. It helps you create an environment where people want to be. So this is that one-on-one meeting form that you can download from the process library over in Guiding the Business. And then one last process that I'm going to talk about here, which is also relative to job descriptions and everything we've been referring to, is performance review. So performance review should happen once a year, and it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to compensation. It can if you want it to be, but what it's really about is giving the employee a review of what they've done for the year, feedback, which is really important. So this performance review process, it's got it like a work plan, which explains how it's used, and you can look at that through the 4 key functions, or you can look at it here. And then it's got these documents and custom forms, which you can use for your performance reviews. How this is connected to a job description is that this work listing right here, what you're evaluating them on, are their processes from the job description. So this is one of the reasons that how the connection between the job descriptions and the performance review. So here you'll see open and close the office, answer the phone, take orders. These are all processes from the job description for this position. So in the work plan where it talks to you about how to create these performance reviews, you're literally just going to the org chart here, and you're going to the job description, and you're highlighting all this information and cutting and pasting it into that form. And then you're literally giving a review for every process. How did she do on her key performance indicators? How did she do on the budget? How did she do on cash flow? And you do like a -5 to +5, and you write comments. So you're reviewing the actual work, which is the work from the job description. Now, this comes like full circle in a really great way if you've been doing the one-on-one meetings. Because if you've done those one-on-one meetings once a month or once a quarter, and you sat down with Mary and you've been talking to her about all these processes, you've been saying, gee, cash flow planning was really great this year, or the receivables are looking really good. Accounts payable we need to work on. Let's talk about this process. If you've been doing that kind of communication all throughout the year, when you sit down to do the performance review, it's so easy. It's amazing. You have real tangible things to say to the employee about their work. You're not just trying to make it up. And what's even better is there's no surprises to the employee. Because if we've been talking about the accounts receivable process and collecting on the receivables, and there's been issues and we've been discussing them, when we get to the performance review and the employee gets a -0 on this, well, they know why, because we've been talking about it. So this process, again, for performance review is here in Guiding the Business. So right here, if you go to Guiding the Business and you go to the library, you're going to find those 2 processes right here. And you'll want to select them and kind of make them your own. This performance review process, now I'm looking at it from the process tools page, there's quite a bit in here. And you might decide that you want to use the uploaded file instead of the custom form, or you want to use the Word document. So you'll want to like clean it up and kind of make it your own, and then start to use it. So I've got a few questions. Yeah, so I have a couple minutes left, so I'll answer this one. You can do the performance reviews directly in TouchStone. So if I go here to my control panel, and I'm the manager of admin finance, and so these are all my employees here, and they've been set up in account administration and added as users and assigned positions, and that's why I see them here. But if I'm the manager and I'm going to do a performance review for one of my employees, I would click performance review. And the process wouldn't be this cluttered because you will have like cleaned it up. This is just the pure library process, which gives you a lot of options. I'm just going to collapse it so it looks a little simpler. So let's say I use the document tool. I would click performance review, and here's the form. So then I would put in the work listing, and then I would go in and give the grade, like 5. And then I'd write in the comments. So I'm filling this form out right inside of TouchStone. Go in, fill all this out like I'm completing the form. And there's inside the uploaded files, there's some other kind of more performance review boilerplate questions, like what are the goals you have for the employee for the next year and stuff like that. It's not just all rating the processes. So then I would save this as the employee's name. And when I save it, it date and time stamps it. And now a copy of this is saved back to TouchStone. If I want to print it, I just hit this little print button. Yeah, my printer form's not connected because I don't have Word. But you'd hit the little print button and it creates a PDF. It'll pull up your print screen, and then you can choose PDF and print it if you want to. But now it's, this version is saved back to TouchStone. So if I did this for this year, and then let's say next year rolls around and I'm going to do another review for Mary, I could go here to reports and go to control panel, and I can search for, and I can go to management review and search for Mary's name. Or I can just search by a date range, which, what is it? Today's the 5th. Or I can search the save as title. I saved this, I think, as Mary. And then I just hit run report. And then I'm going to see that performance review form. So this is a long-winded way of answering your question, but basically you can, just like I did, I'm not going to wait for this to load, fill this form in, and then save it back to TouchStone. Same with the one-on-one meeting forms. So if I go back here to the dashboard, go back to this control panel, if I'm preparing for a meeting, a one-on-one meeting with one of my employees, I would go here to this one-on-one meeting form, and I'm making a new agenda form for this week. So I click it, and now I fill all this information in and I save it. And then I can print it if I want to. I can have it open on my computer while we're talking. Either way is appropriate. If you're going for this paperless kind of culture and work environment, don't print this. Have it open on your phone even, or on your computer. And the employees get used to it because they know we're doing things electronically. So I can have my items to discuss all here ready and be looking back on it and talking to her at the same time. So then this is saved, date and time stamped. If I want to go to this agenda form throughout the week and just add more things to it, it's the latest one is always up here at the top. Go back to it, add more things. Next week rolls around and I'm doing this again with another employee. I would just click this form again, and now I've got a copy of it, and I title this for the other employee's name. So really simple. What's also great about this, and I'll leave you with this, is in the org chart, if I'm the president here and I've got a manager of admin finance, I'm trusting this person to be a good manager to these people below. Do the one-on-one meetings, do performance reviews, do training, talk about discipline things, all the good things that I want my managers to be doing. If I have a way of knowing they're doing their work without having to ask them, not waiting for the bookkeeper to quit because they can't stand the manager or telling me how terrible the manager is, or however that happens. If I'm the president, I can just go over here and run a report of this person. and see their meeting agendas, their performance review forums, their training forums. I can see all of that just by running a report. So it allows me to manage and not micromanage, to make sure things are getting done without having to ask, to know information without having to be there. So next week, we are going to be starting our conversation of process documentation and the process tools. So over here are the process tools, and these are the templates you use to document with. This is work plans, checklists, scripts. These are all templates. So this session on how to document using the process tools is going to take 2 weeks. We're going to start next week with work plans and checklists, and then we're going to finish up the following week with the rest of the tools. So I'm going to be talking about technically how to build work plans and checklists, how to use the toolbar, all that functionality, all the functionality on this page. But I'm also going to be talking about how to document a really great work plan. What goes into one? What to do and what not to do. So if you have employees who you want to be documenting processes, I would encourage you to invite them to this session. All you have to do is forward them your link and they can join. They don't need to know about job descriptions and how to build all that and how to do the 4 functions, everything we've been talking about so far. They don't need to know all that. All they need to know is click the process, go build the work plan, and this is how you do it. So that will be next week. And thanks for coming, everybody, and I'll talk to you in a week.